Hello and welcome to another episode of What Do You Know with Joe. I have a great guest and great friend of mine, Scott Webb. Scott, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, you're welcome, Joe. How's it going?
Hey, it's going great. As we talked a little bit in the pre-pod talk, it was fun. It's been fun. It's been good. Hope everything's going well with you.
Yeah, no, can't complain.
See, that's good. That's always good. No, yeah, it's been really good. I'm very excited. A lot of listeners are gonna be excited because I had a lot of people that also said I should have you on before we had talked. Like we had talked and being like we want to have. I was like I easily want to have Scott on, and as I was talking, and people were like, oh, you should have on so and so. A lot of people were like, you should have on Scott, and I was like, way ahead of you. That's a lot. So a lot of people are gonna be very excited to hear this episode when it airs.
You're a man ahead of your times, Joe.
That's what it is. I'm trying to. I feel like that's the only way you can really, get ahead. You have to be ahead, otherwise, you're gonna be like, oh, why didn't I think of that? This is also. I'm trying something new with this microphone. I usually have it in this little stand thing, and so we'll
Hmm.
see how this goes. But anyways, as many of you probably can hear, Scott is from Australia. Scott, where specifically were you from and born in Australia?
So born in a small town. So if you picture the size of America, Australia, and overlay it on top, Australia is about the same size as America. So when you see the picture of Australia, I'm actually from the northeast of the country, in a state called Queensland.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
Okay.
can imagine it, there's a peninsula on the northeast coast. I'm in the northeast region. It's in the tropics, so obviously it gets
Mm-hmm.
quite warm in the summer. And it's a small town of about 5,000 people when I grew up. It's just outside of a town called Mackay, and which is the bigger town nearby. But yeah, so I'm from Serena, Queensland, born and raised there. So yeah, it was
And
it was cool.
what was it? What was it like growing up like in Australia? Like I'm sure as you've seen, especially now in the States. By the way, I think people needed to hear that and hear that Australia is the same size as the United States. I think people like to think USA is like a huge country, and hey,
Mhm.
put in perspective, Australia is the same size. Um, what was it like, especially like you've seen, living in the States for so many years? What was it like growing up in Australia? Is it similar to like that of the States, or a lot of things different, little different variables here and there?
Different variables here and there. It's more a case, I think, of the time of growing up. Like, if you talk to your family or to your aunts and uncles about how they grew up, um, growing up in Australia was similar to that. Obviously, because I grew up in the '60s, I was born in the '60s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, but we didn't have like we didn't really have the Vietnam War, to where you guys had that, and the hippies and that sort of a generation. Even
Woodstock.
though we kind of had, I was way too young to even know about that stuff. Um, but it's also growing up in a small town of 2,000 people. Um, it's very rural. It was an agricultural town. The town was founded basically on the sugarcane industry. So um, it was very different. But in seeing how friends of mine in the US of the same age group grew up, it was similar in that aspect of it. We had, obviously, Australia's population when I was growing up was, probably like about 16, 17 million people for the whole country.
Okay.
Uh, so it's we had growing up, we had two TV stations. When I was born, we had an outhouse. we had a uh, we had a wood stove. So yeah, so it was similar to the US growing up, I guess, in that timeline. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And a couple things with that. First, it makes me think like, there's one uh, first question. It makes me think like, that sounds a lot like there could be is it would you equate where would you equate that with? Is there a place in America that you would equate that with like similarly? It's I mean, because like when you describe it, I feel like there could be somewhere similar, but and then two, you mentioned briefly, like you said, like television and cartoon. What was that like? Like, did you have like Saturday morning cartoons, or was there like a Cartoon Network or Disney Channel of Australia, or were like American like cartoons coming in? What was that like?
No, so we had so equation wise, it's probably if you were to go to the Midwest,
Okay.
um, to the wheat farms, or to or corn, where the farmers are. So it's kind of like, I guess that's sort of a
Okay.
community, because it was a lot of, if you didn't work on the if you were living there, if you didn't work for the local sugar mill, which took the cane from the farmers and turned it into raw sugar or to other raw materials. Um, so you worked in the town, like mum worked as a bank teller
Okay.
when she originally, when she was growing up. Um, dad, dad left school when he was 13 because he didn't like the school system. And he
Hmm.
didn't feel, he didn't think he was smart, that sort of stuff. So he wanted to work. So he started working when he was 13, working in, the local kind of like store where they it was all sorts of back in those days, where it was known, where it was the retail store for food, but it was also for the local farm products, stuff like that. So dad worked there. So it would be more like rural America is where I kind of, I guess, grew up in that aspect of it.
Okay.
Um, and it was TV. We only had two TV stations. We had the government station, which was the Australian Broadcasting Commission, so that was one channel, and the other channel we had, which was local, private enterprise channel. And TV started early in the morning, like about 6 o'clock, and at 10, 11 o'clock at night it was the national anthem, and then it was the universal round colored circle, that every other network used to have when they were shutting down the station. um, but in the morning, we did have Sesame Street, so
Hey.
and we did think it was quite humorous that you pronounce the last letter of the alphabet as a Z, because we always said it was a Z. So that it was the American, the accent was quite humorous. But we did also have other, cartoons. We had Bugs Bunny and the Warner
Hmm.
Brothers, and Porky Pig. So we had those sort of cartoons, and then we
Hmm.
also had our own Australian TV children's shows.
Okay.
Um, much like now there's the Wiggles. Well, we had other shows like Play School and other TV shows that we watched. But so yeah, we had a kind of like a bit of American TV, bit of
Hmm.
Australian TV, but we also had British TV. So we kind of had a cacophony of
Ooh.
different shows as kids growing up. Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I meant the image of Australian Wiggles just kind of walked through my head a little bit, which is pretty cool to think about. um,
Yeah, it wasn't quite the Wiggles we were growing up, but
no, so that you described that aspect, and that sounds pretty cool. Can you tell me? And you briefly touched about it with your dad. Um, Tell me a little about when like you like went through school. Is that similar to the States? And like did you go through like a K to 12, like elementary, middle, high school, and then you know was that like your school experience in Australia? And then with that, do do people, this is kind of a bigger question, maybe we'll save it, but what do did you know you wanted to go to college after high school? I know in the States it's a big thing, everyone's like college, 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 but I know, especially now I think it's getting a little bit better. There's other options, especially there's other things people can do. There's trade schools, there's technical, there's a lot of different things people can do. Do other people, is that more of like the norm in Australia, or is it like America where everyone's like, hey, let's go to college, we got to figure this out?
no. So in that aspect, it's somewhat very different. Um, so when I'm through, we had we called it kindergarten. We had kindergarten, and we had our school system when I was growing up was 1 through 7 at primary school, and then you went to high school, which was 8 through 12. um, so so kindergarten was just kind of, it was not really a structured school system. It was more of you went there and you drew and you played games, and it was more like a social thing
Okay.
at that point. Although you did learn, you did do arts and stuff. But then you went off to grade 1. Schools in Australia, for the most part, there's a few that have changed, but most of them still follow the same. We have a school uniform. So everybody wore the exact same clothes. The exact same black leather shoes.
Hmm.
And except on sports day, when on sports day, then you could wear, sneakers, tennis shoes.
Hmm. Yeah.
And there was also then, a sports uniform as per se.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so school was, when you went to school in the morning and around about 8:30, 9 o'clock. The school day finished at 3 o'clock. And for the most part, we all, being in a small town, we all either walked to school or rode our bikes.
Okay.
So at a very early age, I was in, I think, year two, and I was riding my bike to school with my older siblings. Um, they had buses bringing some kids in, but that was more mainly for a lot of the kids that lived down the road, down the track, who were on the farms. So obviously they couldn't come to school with their parents
Hmm.
because their parents were working on the farms. So they would have buses, but if three or four buses pulled up, that was a lot. The rest, most people were in town or rode their bikes. So that was primary school, and then you
Hmm.
went to high school, which was 8 to 12. And they were two separate schools. So yeah, the primary school, in where I lived, was in one part of town, and the high school was in a different part of town. Um, we are going to school. We had our bags, our books in our bags and stuff like that. But whereas American schools all have lockers,
Yeah.
and if Australia, we outside the classroom, you would have what we would call a port rack, and the port is our word for a bag, because it comes from like porter. So the porter carries your bag. So we have a port. Um, but yeah, so we would have port racks, and you would just leave your ports outside the classroom. They weren't
Yeah.
locked; they were open racks that you basically just threw bags in, and nobody stole. Nobody.
Big trust system.
It was, it was a trust system. And then between classes, if you needed to quickly run to your bag to grab the next book, then you would grab the book and go on to your next class.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and then you go through to high school. And high school, you when I went through, they had a couple of systems with high school. When you got to year 10, the presumption is that not everybody was going to go on to university. So they had a couple of options that you could take. From year 10, you could either leave school at year 10 if you wanted to and go work on the farm, or go
Hmm.
try doing a trade or something like that, or do what you wanted to do from that aspect. Or you could go on to year 11. And with year 11, they split, and they had an 11 EL, which was education for living, which meant you didn't want to leave school yet because you wanted to learn a few more things. So they would have classes which would teach you about, you know, how to live by yourself and stuff like that. So, and that was all of what it was about. So it was 1 year of, banking and how to get a job and stuff like that.
Oh, like actual stuff you need to know, like like real things.
Yes. um, or if you went the other track, then you went to regular grade 11, and then you went to year 12. And then from year 12, at that point, you're presuming you're either going to go on to a university to study, or you're going to leave school anyway and go to a trade.
Hmm.
And that's where that kind of branched out. We have the university system, which is the normal 3 4 year university system.
Hmm.
And we have what's called a TAFE, TAFE, technical and further education. And that's where if you were doing a boilermaker or a plumber or some sort of trade,
Right.
you would go off the TAFE, and you would do because it was a trade school, and you would do 1 or 2 years at the trade school, and then you would go out. The other option is you would go off to university and do your regular diploma or associate diploma or degree at a university. But we never, and at that thing that when we get to university, the first year you were there, you started doing your degree. You didn't do another year of general studies.
I gotta figure it out.
So like,
Taking
you've done 12
kinesiology
general
1000
studies.
as a business major. Taking gym. Why am I taking gym again?
Exactly. So yeah, so that's where that kind of thing kind of uh, it's changed over the years. We've introduced middle schools into our school system in Australia now. Um, but we still have that kind of a structure going on. Like I have nephews and nieces. Some went on and did to university. Other ones took a gap year because gap year is big in Australia, as with most Eastern and European countries, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a couple of nephews and nieces who did a gap year. Some decided not to go back. Others decided to open their own business and have their own business. So, yeah. So we still university is there for those who want to do it, but it's not seen as, oh my God, you've got to go to university, otherwise you'll never
Right.
do anything done with your life.
Right.
So yeah.
Exactly. Which is A, kind of nice, and B, it sounds like for the people who are like, they don't choose to go to university, but they're trying to start a business. Sounds like they're prepared though. Sounds like, hey, not only were they given options to figure out if they wanted to do this, when they chose that option, it was like, okay, here's actually everything you're going to need to know pertaining to this, and cut out all the extra excess stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Which is really
it's not perfect for everybody, but it seems to does well because, as I said, especially if you want to do a trade or something like that, you don't have to go to university to do the trade stuff. Or any other sort of business like that. It's like, why go to university if you don't need to, if you don't want to, become that sort of a career person.
right. And I have a question from that. So let's say, because this sounds, to be honest with you, but it sounds awesome. It sounds like you're giving kids a lot of the options that like you don't have that option here in the States. I'm just gonna say that. So that's kind of nice to hear. But let's say you go down that TAFE route, right? Or let's say you want to go there. Do like the university, like you went to James Cook, do those kind of schools require you to take like the EL or the other route? Or could you go to like TAFE and then be like, hey, I want to apply to like a James Cook or Sunshine Coast? Do you have to go back and maybe finish? And like, is that kind of like something like people do? Or could you like be like, hey, I went to TAFE, here's my credentials, here's what I learned, and then try to get in that way?
Yeah, no, you don't have to go back. So an example, when I was doing my degree at James Cook, there were people. There were people who came onto campus and studied, who had been in the workforce and were coming back to further their to get a degree or diploma or something like that. So you don't have to go back and complete your high school certificate or what the equivalent the equivalent
Right.
here in the US or thing to do that. So you don't have to have graduated year 12. If you've been in the workforce and you say, well, look, I want to do this, then you apply to the university based on other merits, and they call them mature age students coming back into the university system. So you can come back and not have graduated high school. You have to come back on other merits.
Right.
It's not like you can just say, I'm turning up, here I am.
Yeah.
Although I have to give credit to, one of the degrees I was doing, there were people there that were in it that were in their 60s at the time, and they were coming back because their grandchildren were at uni, or there was computers were just coming out and they wanted to come in and learn. So they were coming in at 60 years of age, yeah, and learning computing. So
yeah,
God bless them.
yeah, right, exactly. No, and a couple questions with that, and that's cool to hear. When you were at James Cook, is it like the same thing as like universities at in the States, or do people? One question I do have is, one, do people, do you have to take entrance exams, or do you have to have a certain GPA, and is it 4-year degree? So you kind of briefly mentioned you guys kind of jump right in, to what you guys are learning. Is it 2 years? Is it 4 years? And then with that, I know like you guys obviously, like Australia has sports. Do people get scholarships for for athletics to schools like that? Can people get scholarships for, I mean, academic scholarships I'm sure exist, but like do other things like that exist with universities in Australia as well?
So that's, I guess, the university system is it's similar but different. So for example, we have when you go to uni, you can do either a 2-year diploma or associate diploma, or a 3-year degree. And then
Okay.
4 years if you want to go on and do your doctorate, your PhD, masters, all that sort of thing. So they're all kind of adjuncts onto that, add time on ad infinitum. So for example, like, okay, when I went to university, I was going to get I was doing a 3-year degree in Bachelor of Science. So the first year, you're starting off and you're doing, math, advanced math, chemistry, biochemistry, physics, those sort of classes. So that was a 3-year program. After doing, attempting to do that for a couple of years, I was like, this is not for me. I don't like the chemistry. I don't like the physics. I'm going to have to change. So I changed midstream and switched over to computer studies. But it's when you're going there, it's the terms are different because we're not doing general studies up front. So the academic terms are different in that aspect of it. The living, so I lived on campus because where I was going to university was 4 hours away from where I grew up. So I lived on campus in a non-denominational college. So some of our residences are actually called colleges. So, for example, the Catholic residence was called St. Mark's College, St. Paul's College, sorry. So we have the names of the denominational residences are colleges, and they're normally named such in that way. But so we don't have frat houses. We don't have the Alpha community, the Greek community, because we don't have that sort of a lifestyle on campus. But we do have, the different residences for those who are staying on site on the grounds. And the sports that are played between the different colleges on campus. As I said, this is from my aspect of growing up in the university I went to, and it is slightly different depending on, like, if you went to some of the bigger universities in Sydney and Melbourne, stuff like that. But we didn't have the, like here, where you have the college football and the college basketball and all the other sports. We had sports, but they were more social in that aspect of it. And yes, we did get together and you would watch the games of that, but they were not to the extent that they are here, where it's televised and shown and people bet on and so that. So that aspect was very different. With the social aspect and the sporting aspect of it. So we don't really have that. That's it. That sort of thing going on. Well, not when I was going through that. So that may have changed in the last 10, 15 years, but definitely not in the 80s when I went through. So
okay. And I'm glad you went into that. And the other question, I guess, it may seem insignificant. Did you guys have like a mess hall or like a dining hall on campus as well?
So each college had a dining hall.
Yeah.
And it was just included. So when you paid your tuition to stay on, so there was 2 tuitions. One was the college, the university tuition to go to school, and then the other one was to living in residence at a particular place. So when you apply to the university to go to their so there's 2 parts of it. So there's the applying to the university, and then there's also applying to where you want to stay if you want to stay on campus. So the first 3 years I stayed on campus, and then my final year I moved off campus with some friends into a rental property. But when you apply to the residence, you basically had your meals so you had your accommodation, and then next door was a rec room and TV rooms and the dining hall, sort of stuff like that. So you would go down there for your meals. To the common room.
So that aspect sounds pretty similar. That sounds like that aspect sounds pretty similar.
But our residence was single occupancy, so that was the thing. Everybody has their own room. Nobody shared rooms with anybody else.
That's kind of nice. It's nice because like you have your own room, but you're still with other people, so like you can still be social. So that's kind of like the ideal situation. Wow, it sounds like the first half of this interview I've heard, it's like Australia just thought of things and was like, let's just make it a little bit better. That's just what the vibe I'm getting right now. But when did you, and kind of pivoting here, you got your degree, you were ready to go. How did you, was it immediately as soon as you were done graduating, you were coming to the States, or did you know, like, when did you come across coming, to United States, and when did that part of your life, journey start?
Okay. Yeah. So that was that was pure fluke. Because
Here we are
when
today.
because when I was going through school, and my parents was like, "Well, what do you want to do when you finish high school?" And so I said, "Well, I would like to go work in the local sugar mill as a chemist." Um, and so originally, I wasn't even going to go to university to study. And so my parents got me to talk to the local chemists at the sugar mill, and they were like, "No, you really probably want to go to university first, get your degree, and then come back to work for us. Because if you come work for us, then you're doing it part time. And so instead of being a 3-year degree, you're doing it part time, so it becomes 6." So off I went to university, did the university shtick, and after 2 years, I kind of was like, "Yeah, chemistry is not my stick," and so I switched over to accounting and computing, because at that time you couldn't do computing without doing accounting.
Sure.
Um, and so I was doing that, and in my final year of doing the computing course, we had, which the US has, where you have recruiters from companies coming on to
Right.
campus, and saying, "Hey, look, come work for us afterwards."
Right.
Well, one of the groups that came to talk through was the government, who came to the campus, and they was the group that came through that I was talking to was from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which is the ABS.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they kind of said, "Look, we'd love you to come work for us afterwards. If you're interested, send us, once you graduate, send us your letter, and we'll, consider you highly." So sure enough, that's what I ended up doing. I
Mhm.
applied, and much to the displeasure of my parents, were like, "You can't just apply to one job, Scott.
This
You really need, you really
is
need to
it.
open
I'm
up."
putting all my eggs in this basket.
Exactly. Well, as it would be, I got the job, and the job landed me in Canberra, uh, working for the government, the
Uh-huh.
federal government. So I worked for them for 5 years,
Okay.
and while I was there, some friends. One of my friends was a consultant for the government at that time, and she said, "Look, I've just applied for this job in the US. It's all expenses paid, 3 months. Well, we should all go." So we all thought, "Oh, that's pretty good idea. Let's do
Right.
it."
Yeah.
So we all applied, and five of us ended up coming to the US for 3 months, originally for 3 months.
Hmm.
And on the way over, we stopped in Hawaii. We partied up in Hawaii on the way through, and then we got to the
Nice.
US. And so the our first jaunt in the US turned out it was in Louisiana, which we thought Louisiana is great. New
Yeah.
Orleans, we come.
Going from
Um,
Hawaii to Louisiana, you guys are just hitting great spots. You guys are hitting great spots.
Although where we landed in Louisiana was not New Orleans, it was in a place called Shreveport.
Hmm.
Um, and Shreveport is located up in the Texarkana region. Up, if you're looking at Louisiana as the letter L, in the
Hmm.
top left corner is a place called Shreveport. It's
Okay.
about 3 hours due east of Dallas,
Okay.
and that's where we landed. And many stories there, but yeah, so we were there for originally 3 months, and they wanted to extend us, so they ended up extending us for 18 months. And yeah,
Wow.
that's where we kind of started, was in Louisiana.
Wait, so let me just, you went from a 3 months all expenses, and then they signed you on for an additional 18.
Yeah, well, because what it was
That's awesome.
the assignment they brought us to was actually quite a large one. That was working for an oil and gas company called Arkla Gas, ARKLA, Arkansas Louisiana Gas Company.
Hmm.
Um, they were headquartered in Shreveport, and they had a very old computer system, and so they had hired all these companies from around the US to bring in a large swath of people to basically redo their whole system, from payroll, finances,
Hmm.
everything, consumer facing, all of it to be computerized. So there was about, I would say, an easy, at the height, probably 200 contractors working
Okay.
on the job, and they had people. we had people from Louisiana itself. We had people from California, from New York, from all over the US. We had South Africans, Australians, New Zealanders, you name a country, and there
Yeah,
was representation of those people in Louisiana because it was
that's
such a
cool.
large job.
Yeah.
That bring all these people in with all this expertise to rewrite the
Mhm.
software.
That's really cool. So when you're doing this and they extend you for 18 months from and again, because and like I feel like we could have our own show about this from a strictly like 30,000 foot view. How does that all work with like a work visa, or like did you have to have a work visa, or like
Yeah.
was
Oh
it?
yeah.
I imagine having all that is like like you're always doing paperwork or something like that, and it's like 6 times more inconvenient than just the average person. Like I don't think people understand. Like high level view, what was that like?
So the high level view is, you obviously, depending on obviously each group of individuals, there was, and the companies that bought them there. So the company that transferred us over there from their headquarters in Australia brought us in on, we came in on business visas because we were still reporting and still charging to the Australian company.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. We came in as business visas. You had other people there who were there on, who were citizens, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and you had other people coming in on green cards who had been in the US, working in the US for other international companies at that time. So I started out with the business, and once I realised I was going to be staying there longer, I
Mm-hmm.
applied for a green card. Um, so I ended up going through all the steps in order to apply for a green card. And at that time, it took quite a few years because I had to apply for the job as though I was there and against other applicants, and they had to advertise. So they advertised the job in a number of national papers,
Mm-hmm.
and so not only was I applying, so I was applying as part of a pool. So they said, okay, we'd like Scott to be here, but we recognise we need Americans and other people who are living here that same opportunity. So they would apply, and they would basically open up the jobs for multiple
Yeah.
people, and then they would hire 4 or 5 people, 2 or 3 Americans, and they would also hire 1 or 2 Australians or British or whatever,
Sure.
UK, whatever, for that job there. And that way it satisfies the criteria that, they're not just giving it to a foreign a national, they're giving it
Yeah.
to the local people as well, to local citizens as well.
Right.
So I went through all that stuff there. Um, and so that the green card application took a few years to go
Mm-hmm.
through. I think it took like 2 or 3 years for it to finally go through. And so that's when I moved on to being on a green card,
Mm-hmm.
which PS, it's not a green card, it's a pink card.
Which I think is even more funny because, like, I'm sure there's a story of why it started. Maybe it started off green, but like, I'd love to hear that and why it's still called that. And continuing on with that, and again, because I feel like Scott, we should do like a mono, like an episode, like 3 episodes with you, because we could keep diving into all these. But keeping on that 30,000 foot level and keeping on the same subject, when did you? For those who don't know, like again, you're a U.S. citizen now as
Correct.
well,
Yes.
correct? And you have dual citizenship in
Yeah.
Australia. What was that process a little bit like? And when did you realize maybe you wanted to get your U.S. citizenship?
Um, so so the green card I kept for 10 years on the green card. So I kind of looked at it and said, um, there's a possibility that my life would be remaining here in the US forever and a day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what's the rather than because every time you apply, so the green card you have to reapply every 10 years, and you have to be
Sure.
fingerprinted and go through that whole spiel. Um, but but my life basically at this point is that I'm very much here, and so I kind of was like, nah. And so I went back and forth a few times, and the thing that helped me up on it was that at one point Australia did not recognise. They said, once you become one, you lose your citizenship if you go to another citizenship.
Oh,
And
dang.
other countries used to do that. But then Australia changed their mind and said, no, you won't lose it. You can. They would recognise dual. So that when it made it became a bit easier for me to make that decision. Okay, I'm going to go
Absolutely.
dual. So yeah,
That's a tough. Yeah, I would definitely have to think about that for sure. It's like, wait, okay, what do I like? That's that's
yeah,
not really necessarily fair either. So I'm glad they switched that.
yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
Okay, so and again, I definitely we're definitely gonna have to have you back on because I feel like we could talk hours just about that whole process and everything. So as people are listening to me, Scott, as I mentioned, Scott is a friend. I've known Scott since I was, I mean, like a wee lad. How did you cross paths with my dad? How did you mention computers and account? How did you cross paths with the company my dad was working for?
Yeah, yeah. So
Never actually
um,
really. I don't think I really know the story honestly too. So this is good for me to listen to as well.
it's pretty easy. It's it harkens to a comment your dad made, and when he was talking to you about it, is that you always talk to people because you don't know where those people, the history of
Mhm.
those people and what those people are and what they will be in your future. So you should never not talk to people that you don't know.
Right.
So what happened was I guess is I eventually wound up in New York with the job working at in Midtown Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was there on assignment, um, the I was on in a project team which did quite a lot of like back office type projects, and I was put on a project which was once again rewriting a major uh, piece of software for the company, and I was kind of put on the same team as your dad. Um,
Sorry, that makes me laugh to think about.
And so I guess we'd have a few meetings up, and it was around about Christmas, and your dad being your dad,
Mhm.
because we went home to your mum and said, "There's this guy that I work with, and you know, he's doesn't have any family here in the States, and would it be okay to bring him home, I guess?" And
Mhm.
that's kind of the dialogue your dad had with your mum. And so turns out that I got to come out to your place out in
Mhm.
Bethpage in Bohemia.
Mhm.
Um, and so that kind of went from there, and the with work and everything, all of a sudden we started having to travel to all the regional offices. So I started doing a lot more traveling with your dad to all these
Mhm.
offices. He as an employee and myself as a consultant, and then all of a sudden I was going out to your place and in the summer, and and then all the Christmas, and so so that was
Yeah.
so you guys became my go-to Christmas family, much like I have an Easter family and a Thanksgiving family.
Right. Exactly.
So that's kind of how I started coming out to your house.
Yeah.
And it went from there. So I was there when you guys were in cribs and
Damn.
nappies and
I was gonna say what I was like. Was I when you first came to Bohemia? Was I around yet? Because by that time I might not. I may not have been A and B. Like that's. I think I was one, and then my parents moved down to Virginia. So I wasn't
yeah,
even
no.
in Bohemia.
So I so I was there with I believe with Anthony when Anthony was born. No, I wasn't
Okay.
there as in there, but I remember going out to
My
the
mom, my dad, Scott. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. I would not be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised.
so I was out there early on, and I said because I remember all growing up with you guys growing up with Anthony. So that's kind of when I came into the scene was around about the Anthony timeline.
Hmm.
Um, and and then obviously then when you turned up and so it was the Christmas and all that was out there was before you, so yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that's again, I think that's like the first time I've heard that story. I always thought you were like again because for the longest time I never knew what my dad did. So and at the same time by that logic, I never knew what you did. So by asking my dad and my mom, like, hey, how does, dad know Scott? There was just no way I was going to comprehend that, how you guys actually met. And hearing that now, it makes a lot of sense. So that was cool to hear. And, I segueing into that, because again, I'm gonna have to do the Scott saga. But the next, like, pivoting into that, is that still kind of like what you do, like that consulting role, or have you moved on to other ventures? I know you rent out, houses and, our area and all over the country, and then, you have the bakery. But, I'm not gonna spoil too much, but, what else do you still do that consulting, or have you moved on to other stuff?
You could say I've moved on. So I do. So I worked the major consulting stuff I worked through till 2 years ago,
Okay.
when the vendor that I was doing a lot of work for, did a lot of reorging, and so I didn't go back to them. So I remained working at the bakery, and I have some friends who have um, some other some business, not side business, but that's their businesses, renting dumpsters and the like. So I do a little bit of odd job work for them, and I work normally, when I'm not busy with the bakery, 1 day a week at the bakery,
Mm-hmm.
where I do all the web development, and I do the books and payroll and all sort of back office work and bills and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that's normally like a 4 or 5 hour gig once a week. At
Okay.
the moment, we're doing a POS, so I'm, doing a bit of POS work.
Okay.
Um, but other than that, no, I've decided that I no longer need to worry about working full time for any gig. So
The dream.
um, I I'm like your dad. I'm semi. No, I'm not like your dad. Your dad's retired. I'm I'm semi.
But that's definitely retired.
I look forward to the day that I could be like your dad and say I'm done. I quit. I
Mhm.
now, no, although that'll probably never happen, because I always, my whole big goal that I always wanted to head towards was, at some point, when I finished doing my main career, I wanted to be able to go to these mum and pop businesses around town, or go
Mhm.
to a local charitable organization, say, look, I'll just donate my services to you, or for a
Yeah.
meager, income, just, throw me a few bucks, whatever, and I'll
Right.
do your pay, I'll do your banking, your computer systems or whatever.
Right.
So something where it's a case of I do it because I wanted to do it. Well, no, I've always wanted to do it. So, so yeah, but just in the case of just something to keep me busy, sort of a thing. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
No, I understand that, because I think about, you know, I don't know what this will turn into, but I could easily, like, it definitely, just because this is a simple concept of talking to people, I would love to do this eventually, like, 30, 40 down years. Well, I hope I'm retired in 30, 40 years, but um uh this is something that's, easy to do, and like by the time I'm that age, having the connections I have, I'm sure will be more, branched out. It would, it's like you said, I definitely would want to, I feel like, continue to do something, but as long as it's on my time, like,
yeah,
it's on my accord. So with that, I guess, moving on to the next one, and we've definitely talked about a bunch, and I think the one about high school definitely takes, the cake. What are, especially since you have, citizenships in both, what are some of the things about, give me two things you like about Australia more than the United States, if you can, and then two things about the United States you may like a little bit more than Australia,
hmm.
just to be fair.
Yep. Well, I guess the one thing which comes to mind is the um, the laid back laid back attitude, laid back lifestyle of Australia. So what Australia is very much a chillax. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, it is, when you're working stuff like that, it's business as usual thing.
Hmm.
Um, but we always, life always comes first, and I've always, through my whole career, I always say, I work to live, I don't live to work.
Right.
Because the day I drop dead, they're going to have another person sitting in my chair doing my job.
Right.
So I've always, a piece of that. So that's, I think, and that's endemic to how we were brought up as well.
Hmm.
Um, always enjoy your job, always bring the right attitude to the work. And I look at my nephews and nieces, and they're also very, they love their jobs, and they love what they do. But they're always wanting to enjoy themselves. Like when they had my nieces had gap years between going from school to high school, from going from school to university, or into their careers. So, we're all about on the weekends going and hanging out, having barbecues, or going to the beach, or
Hmm.
doing something. So that aspect of it is that's the key. That's the key difference, I think, between the Australia and US is we like having a good time, and we like making fun of ourselves. Um, we're very much what's called an ockers, where we make fun of yourself, because if you can't make fun of yourself,
Right.
then so that's, I guess that's two things. Is one is we're definitely, it's all about the attitude, I think, of Australia, is that we're seen as the lucky country, because we have great beaches, great lifestyle, and yeah, so that's, I guess, two aspects of it, is the lifestyle, and the ability to make fun of yourself, and not take everything so seriously.
Yeah.
um, so that's from Australia point of view.
No
From
walking
you,
furries.
no, I can furries, exactly. Yes, that one's it. Or so yes, or having the piss taken out of you because I say the letter H. Uh, yeah, being able to laugh at yourself is a good thing to be.
Hmm.
Um, that being said, so things about the US. One thing I've always thought is amazing, and I've respected it, is the Americans' pride in their country. No matter where you go, um, American flags fly everywhere. If you were to go to
Hmm.
Australia, you'd see the odd occasional Australian flag flying around the place, but in the
Hmm.
US, everybody is an American, and they love telling people that they're American, and um, sometimes except when they're when they're traveling overseas, but
Yeah, no, some places they're like, oh no,
in Australia,
I'm Italian.
but but when you hear that the pride, and and you go to the sporting events, and it's definitely regardless, whether they're at home or whether it's a sporting event or where they are, Americans love saying they're American. So, yeah, so
Right.
that's a big thing that I think is amazing about America. Um, and the other thing is the which is great about America is getting around. With the highways, the planes, and the transportation. To get anywhere, you've got the freeways. Where
Hmm.
it's multi-lane highways, and or getting from one city to another. It's a quick flight.
Hmm.
Um, I go back to Australia, and I'm traveling on, except for around the capital cities, I'm traveling on one-lane highways. Uh, and to get from my sister's place to where my dad used to live is about an 8 hour flight, because I've got to take two planes, and and
Woo.
so there's different things about America. It's easy. It's definitely, because it is a bigger country. I mean,
Hmm.
Australia's population still is only like about 26 million people now. So with different vastness of numbers, obviously, then you get a lot more things. So
Hmm.
um, you know, call centers, when you're calling in for a phone line, at least with the US, you can get a bit of thing. You do a phone call to a
Hmm.
utility company in Australia. Yeah, you're on the phone for a couple of hours.
Hey, sometimes that happens here. Sometimes I was
Yes,
on. I think
sometimes
I
that
was on the
happens
phone with
here, but yes.
yeah, but it's you like it. Okay. And I know I had some other questions, and I know we're coming up on time. I want to scrap them because another cool fact I love telling people, and I think other people should learn is you are by far the biggest world traveler. I know. For those who don't and confirm this stuff from you've been to all 7 continents, correct?
Correct, yes.
That's crazy to think about. So in the last couple of minutes before we wrap up,
I would love to hear maybe your top 3 favorite places you've ever been. I know that's really hard, but give me some of it's okay if you have others, but maybe your top 3.
Yeah.
And then
maybe a crazy traveling story that some maybe would people would scratch their heads.
Oh, um, top three. So that's the tough part of that question is that there's different places have different reasons for why I go there.
Hmm.
Like going to Antarctica. Um, that was my lifelong, one I've always wanted to go to, and thankfully
Hmm.
I had some other friends who were wanting to do a similar trip, and so we did a trip to Antarctica, and that by boat from Chile, from Argentina, across the passage into Antarctica. So that was amazing. That was
Hmm.
um, well and truly up there with the top three. Um, the I guess the other so I'm going to kind of do it by continent. So Africa, I mean, I've done South, Central, and Northern Africa, and to me, I've some of the nicest people I've met are in some of the most rural places of Africa. So Africa was phenomenal unto itself. I've been there a few times, um, and Asia. I've done China, Vietnam, Japan, um, Indonesia. So quite a few of the continents with countries within Asia,
Hmm.
and once again, the nice people. And I guess that brings into the funny stories, and this happened early on in some of my travels. I went to Thailand with a couple of friends, and it was uh, friends similar to a meeting with your dad. I was in
Hmm.
a meeting one time at work with some friends, and one of them said, and I'd only known them for a short period of time, said, "Oh yeah, my husband and I are going on a trip to Thailand," and I was like, "Oh, it sounds really good." So she said, "Why'd you come?" And so she went home. And she said, "I think I just invited somebody from work to come to Thailand with us."
He's going with.
So out of the blue, shortly thereafter, I was in Thailand with two people, which I'd only kind of recently just met at work,
Right, exactly.
and what the trip to Thailand involved tracking through the jungles of northern Thailand
Hmm.
on a 3-day trek. So it was myself, the colleague of mine at the time, and her husband, and our tour guide. And for 3 days, we trekked through the jungles, and we slept in villages and ate the local food.
No.
And as I said, uh, some of the most amazing experiences and the most amazing people I've met.
Hmm.
Yeah, we're in these little villages in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's awesome.
so yeah.
And Scott, I want to ask like a billion more questions, and honestly, you're gonna have to come back on, and that's the best part. Like we said, the best part about this is I plan on keep doing this. We could have a million Scott episodes, and we could talk for hours, and I think we definitely should. But before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to share, or anything you wanted to shed some light on? Anyone you think I should interview next?
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, off the top of my head, yeah, no, I could think of a few people, but then I tried the names under the bus. They'd be like, "What'd you call me for?" um, so yeah, so no, yeah,
Okay.
no, you got me there. No, sorry, no.
No, it's all good. It's all
I'll
good.
think I'll get back to you.
Okay. Well, like I said, we'll definitely have you back on. And Scott, I can't thank you enough for joining me. You always are welcome on the show. Heck, Scott, if you wanted your own segment, you could have it. It's yours. It's 100%. to go into business with you, Scott, would just, for me, it would be the smartest thing I've ever done. In 30 years, I'd be like, well, one day Scott told me, and it would just be a wrap. But anyways, I want to thank you again for joining me. I think everyone's going to enjoy the episode. And again, thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for the honor of interviewing me. I very much appreciate it.
Of course. Again, we'll have you on for sure. But thanks everyone for listening. Tune in again next week for another guest. And with that, we'll jump into the outro song. Later, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.